I'm Pippa Crerar. I'm political editor of the Daily Mirror and a long-term member of Women in Journalism, and delighted to be hosting this In Conversation event with Sian Williams, who you will all know as one of our best-known broadcasters and journalists, who has in recent years also taken on a whole nother career as well. So as if journalism wasn't enough, and so we're going to be talking a bit about how she's managed to do it all, really. But as I say, she's best known as a journalist and broadcaster. She was on the BBC for years, and then more recently ITN, Channel 5 now. But Sian, as I mentioned, more recently you've been splitting your time, and have also been supporting people as a counsellor and a psychological therapist. And I just wondered whether you could tell us a bit more about why you made that decision to branch out into this whole other area at this point in your career.
Hello everyone. Firstly, lovely to see so many of you in here on a very hot day. Really appreciate your time. I think because so I've been in journalism for about 35 years now, and I was very aware from the beginning when I started, and one of my first big jobs, I guess, was covering the Hillsborough disaster in 1989, a couple of years after training stopped. And I think I was very aware of the way that journalists are parachuted into somebody's life at their worst possible moment, to collect stuff from them and then disseminate that, whatever it is, which is an incredibly important role. And it's bearing witness to difficult stuff and allowing people to have a voice, I guess. But there are huge responsibilities that come with that. And I think responsibilities to those you are talking to and hearing from, but also responsibilities for your own mental health as well, because often you are parachuted into something, you cover the story, the tragedy, the disaster, you're in a war zone, you're in an uncomfortable court case, you're wherever it is, you do it, you get the voices, you put them on air, or you write them up, or you put them on the TV screen, and then you're gone. And the research was suggesting there can be a lot of guilt that's associated with that for journalists, that actually they are in that bearing witness role, but not in a helping role in the same way as the kind of first responder would be, and that can create pressure. And I was aware in my colleagues that this could kind of build up and up and up and up, and it was, you know, like a glass that you would fill and fill and fill and fill, and that sometimes it would just overflow, and that some people were, including me actually, became very conscious of this kind of push-pull of wanting to get the story. Am I dealing with my interviewee in a responsible way? They've been very emotive. That's good telly. You know, that kind of push-pull, which can really sort of, unless you reflect on it, when you come away, that glass just fills up and overflows, and it's difficult to know what to do with it. And I was aware of that in myself and in my colleagues. So I trained as a trauma assessor years ago, so that I could recognize it in my colleagues and help spot it. And then I became interested in what the brain does. You know, why is it that our brain goes to that kind of threat space? And what do we do when we're there? And how do we pull ourselves back? How do we manage our mental health and protect those people that we're talking to? And I thought the only way to do that is to do a science degree, a master's. So I did an MSc in psychology. I'm not a scientist, so it was a bit of a challenge. And now I'm doing a final year of a doctorate in counselling psychology. And so, yeah, that's the long answer.
Well, I'm very impressed by the fact that you've pursued an academic scientific route without that background. I think when we talked last week, you were saying I think you'd done GCSE science, and that was it some years ago.
Yeah, in fact, it was so many years ago, Pippa, that I think it was O levels at that time.
Oh, right, okay.
And I failed my maths spectacularly, actually, and was so poor that they didn't put me in for the CSE. The CSE was the one below O levels. Anyone of a certain age will kind of know where we are here. And it was just, I was written off, absolutely written off. You know, this woman can't do science, she can't do maths, blah 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 blah. And so and it was foolish, really, for me to think, I know, I'll do a science master's. And then I remember sitting in the exam room, because it was theoretical, it was also exam based. And I'm sitting in the exam room, and it was a statistics paper. So a master's level statistics paper, and I thought I was going to throw up. When the invigilator said, "Oh, you're a 40 whatever year old woman," back in the exam room, I'm thinking, what are you doing? And she says, "You can turn over your paper now." And I'm looking around at all these people going, scribble, 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 scribble. And I had this rush of kind of anxiety and panic. And I did think, I'm going to throw up. I'm not going to be. I just saw numbers and they just swam in front of me. But I did it and I got it, and and I'm really glad I did it. And I'm glad I challenged myself, but it was not nice at the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Really great that you were able to push yourself in that way. Now, you mentioned that you were a trauma assessor. I think that was at the BBC. And you also mentioned Hillsborough and the fact that you'd covered that. But there are other moments that I guess you would sort of conventionally describe as traumatic stories to cover that you've been involved with, famines and warfare and so on. Can you sort of give us a bit of a flavour of your first-hand experience of dealing with those sorts of stories?
Well, I guess, the one that springs to mind immediately would be the Kashmir earthquake in 2004, I think it was, or 2006. I'm just thinking and as a journalist, you get this sort of rush of adrenaline when a story breaks, and there's some guilt associated with that, because it can be a awful story, and as a journalist, it's like, I need to be there to report on it. So you've got this and you're sent immediately, and you're thinking about the logistics, how am I going to get to the scene when all the infrastructure is messed up, what's it going to be like when we get there, and then when we did get there, and we were one of the first teams in fact, I think we were the first team in to the epicenter. It just was, it was apocalyptic, and just it's still kind of, I still get quite emotional thinking about it, because these people were they were digging with their hands through the rubble to try to get to people that they'd lost. And I was presenting all the news bulletins from there, and I was doing breakfast and the 1 o'clock news, and this was when I was at the BBC, obviously. Breakfast, the 1 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news, and the 10 o'clock news, and also World, and News 24. So it was continuous, and I remember doing a broadcast for the 1 o'clock news, and I could hear some stuff going on behind me, and I didn't know what it was. But, there's lots of shouting and lots of, and I was just looking down the lens and doing the stuff. And when I finished the broadcast, because I could hear some sort of that like keening or wailing, or when I turned around and I'd finished the broadcast, there were 3 brothers going through the rubble trying to find their mum, and they'd found her and she hadn't survived. And it was just, you just think, your responsibility then. Had I known that, obviously, I would have took the camera elsewhere, or so. And I was really aware of my responsibility of intruding on these people's guilt, of intruding on these people's grief. How funny I should use the word guilt, because that's absolutely what I was feeling at that moment. Just intense, a sort of compassion, but also the impotence of not feeling like you're able to do anything. And of course you were, in a sense, because every time we went on air, the phone lines, the helplines, the kind of, send your money to Kashmiri earthquake appeal just went woof. So you knew you were doing a job. And of course there were loads of people there saying, that's where my family live, what's happened to them, we need information, why isn't the aid getting there fast enough? So you did feel you were a conduit for all this anger and pain and suffering, and that you could hear from them and allow their voices to be heard really, really loudly. But then that you were going to go back home, and they weren't. And I think that was that to me was, this is the job, this is the job. Where is your responsibility here? What do you need to do to make sure that you adhere to your responsibilities as an ethical, compassionate human being and journalist in this role, that you don't expose too much, that you are cautious with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Kashmir earthquake was only one big story that you covered of many. And some of these experiences went into your book, A First Aid Kit for Getting Through Tough Times, which was, initially about trauma, but became about building resilience. And in it, you talk about your own path through breast cancer. It's a very different type of traumatic experience, very personal one. Did that also impact on how you managed to learn how to build resilience?
Yes, it did, because and I guess that what I learned, that sounds very grand, and it was messy and horrible and mucky, because actually learning always is messy and horrible and mucky. You don't start somewhere in a place of anxiety and stress or depression and miraculously go from there to here. The trajectory is not linear. Growth is not linear. Recovery is not linear. It's a wibbly wobbly bridge that you walk on. But I think journalists are, in the main, typically very resilient, because we have to be, don't we? Because we do go out and do the next day and do the next day and do the next day. And I think especially now with younger journalists who perhaps don't have the security that I was very lucky to have, because I had a staff job. I didn't at first, but I was freelance for a long time, and I'm freelance now. But in that middle period, I had a staff job, and I realize how lucky I am because of that. But journalists are typically very resilient creatures. And when I had this personal thing, I got through all the surgery, and I got through the breast cancer and all the stuff afterwards, okay, the physical side of it. And then the mental bit of it was like, why aren't I coping? Why? I'm a trauma assessor, I've done an MBA, why aren't I coping? And I was really angry with myself for feeling so vulnerable, I guess, and for not dealing with it. And this, and I thought, so I ended up doing an examination really on resilience, which resulted in me going off and talking to lots of scientists, because I thought the only way I can approach this is as a journalist, and with that sort of science, sort of researcher's brain, which is, right, what do I need to know? Where do I need to get the information from? Who's the expert? What can they tell me? How do I build back my resilience? And then and hopefully to sort of get enough tools and tricks and things insights that might help other people who are in the same position. So I talked to lots of experts and stuff, but I also talked to people who'd gone through very different traumas. So not illness-based, people who'd, lost children, or woman who'd lost her parents in the Holocaust, somebody who'd experienced severe racism, just to see whether there are any commonalities in recovery after trauma. And there were, and the commonalities were, and actually I then did my master's thesis was on journalism coping with trauma and post-traumatic growth, which is effectively resilience after trauma. So are there commonalities there? And there are, which is reflecting on what's happened to you is one of, with somebody who understands and is non-judgmental and who you trust, is one of the most important things you can do. Because I think, and I may be speaking for myself here, but I know that quite a lot of journalists I know, and certainly me, would think, well, that can go in that box and I can stick that at the back of my head, and then I don't need to go near that. I don't need to process that because I'm on to the next thing. And that is that is not a very effective way of coping. Avoidance, distraction, withdrawal, overeating, drinking too much, whatever it is that is your coping strategy, which works really well in the short term, longer term is not very effective. So it's like, right, well, what does work then? And I wouldn't, from a psychological perspective, I wouldn't say, right, there are these 10 things you need to do and ta-da, you're sorted, because it's not that easy. If it was, we'd all be doing it. And actually, if you say that there are these 10 things you need to do, and after that you're sorted, and you do those 10 things and you're still not sorted, you feel like you failed. So, it's not easy, and I appreciate it's not easy. But if you can reflect safely and non-judgmentally with colleagues, that's really good. I think in our industry, as journalists, if you have a supportive environment, so if you feel like your organization is hostile or lacking in support, that is not going to help your mental health. Obviously, other support around you is really crucial. So being able to talk to somebody outside the industry. That might mean talking to somebody you love, but it might mean talking to somebody you don't love. Sometimes we don't want to visit all our stuff on the person because we don't want to worry them. So, but you need to find somebody who will. So there are lots of, we know that part of my study at the moment is in the self-critical brain and mindfulness. And a lot of us have quite a self-critical voice that's saying, come on, get on, you're not coping, or do it better, or get out there and do blah, blah, blah. And we need to find ways of just hearing it. It's been very useful, I think, for a lot of us. It drives us, but hearing that voice and saying, okay, here you are. Thanks very much for reminding me of, whatever script you're reminding me of. There's my not good enough script again. Thanks very much for that, but I might invite something else in to sit alongside you. And I think it's that as well. It's knowing what works adaptively rather than maladaptively, what is nourishing rather than depleting.
It's interesting to hear you talk about how journalists are a resilient bunch, and I do agree, but there's also that expectation that we're resilient, and that you'll cover a story, and then if it's a murder maybe, or something that is potentially very traumatic, and the sort of established way of processing it is go to the pub with your colleagues after work and talk it through. And obviously, that has a place, but it's not enough, is it? Organizations, beyond individuals helping themselves, organizations have responsibility, don't they, to their staff and indeed their freelancers. Do you think that they do enough?
I think it depends what organization you're in. The research that I was doing with some journalists, and it was print and broadcast, the journalists would say, especially those who are isolated workers, I guess, freelancers, short-term contracts, would feel that perhaps they don't get the same level of support as those who are staff, lucky to have a staff job. Perhaps they feel that they're looking after their own mental health. Quite a few of them said, I'd like to have the resources to be able to protect my mental health, but I don't. So where do I go? How do I do it? Who do I? And there are organisations here, and we know them: the Rory Peck Trust and DART, the DART Centre, and various organisations which kind of raise awareness of, look, we've really got to protect people, our storytellers. We've got to protect our storytellers. I think it has shifted over the past few years, definitely. Think it's shifted over the past few years, and I've been giving talks to the BBC and ITN and ITV over the past month or so, because I think the way we've been working over COVID, which is obviously it's changed for all of us, but I think as journalists we're suddenly doing a story that does impact on our life, where we might be reporting on the story, but also are we worrying about people that we love? There's that dichotomy again, that sort of something that is impacting on us while we're reporting on it, which is a very strange place to be. And I think as we're coming out of COVID, we need to and coming out of lockdown. We might not be with what's going on, but we need to be aware that a crisis can occur and traumatic responses can occur after that trauma is over. So that's the time when everybody goes, oh, right, and then whoosh, it all comes in, and you think, what fresh hell is this? Where has this come from that I don't seem to be dealing with this very well? And there needs to be an environment where you can say, without fear of judgment or without fear of your career being harmed, that you can say, listen, you know what? I need a bit of space. I need a bit of space. And I think to have the confidence to say that, and I think that is hard. I appreciate that's hard.
When we chatted last week, we talked a bit about how really the onus is on senior people in organisations to lead by example, really, and that it's about awareness building, but also that power is an issue often in these scenarios. If you're in a newsroom and you're a junior reporter, you maybe don't feel you can appear vulnerable or ask for some time off, or even just ask for a chat and some help. Actually, the onus has to be on the senior people in the newsroom to do that, and to read signals.
I think that's it, but I also think it's about not being afraid of your own vulnerability and your own fragility, and that's something I've been saying to when I've been doing these talks, is that actually it's up to those of us who've been around for quite a long time to say it doesn't matter how long you've been here and what you do, it can affect you wherever you are, and it's okay to say that. It's okay to say, you know, this story has taken a chunk out of me actually, and I might need some time to have a think about it, or do you want to talk about it? And that power thing you talked about, Pippa, I think is crucial, because that comes in the I'm fine conversations that you can have at work. You know, when you sense that a colleague might be struggling and you want to be able to not even open up a conversation, but just do that I'm here if you need to talk thing. I think it's really important to know where it is you are asking the question, how are you? Because it might not be an appropriate place. And if somebody says I'm fine, and you think, nah, you're not, you know, that you don't press it. I mean, I know that sounds obvious, but there can be this sort of power disparity of why are you asking me whether I'm okay or not? I'm perfect. Do I seem weak to you? What are you seeing? What does this mean? And suddenly your threat brain, that bit that goes, whoop, danger, 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 is going off. Of course, you're not going to talk in that environment. But saying something like, I don't know, you know, you opening a conversation. I don't know about you, but what's your thinking about X, Y, and Z? It's felt quite tough this week, hasn't it? Or whatever you can say that kind of puts you on that makes it feel like a parity, that makes you feel like I can have an open, honest conversation here without judgment, and it's not going to get reported back. You're not going to go straight to HR or to the editor and say, I think she's having a bit of a hard, unless, and I always say this to people, if you want me to, I will. And if you want me to come with you, I will. But stuff we talk about is between us. And unless I think, and this is where the psychology comes in, unless I think they are at risk of hurting themselves or other people, and then just, I mean, it's part of all the bodies I belong to psychologically, you know, we all would anyway. You know, if there is a risk of self-harm or suicide, then obviously we need to do something with that. But yeah, I think.
And you touched on COVID and how, of course, that's been a whole different way of working for so many people. I mean, before you even get to the sort of the subject matter, as it were, people are, you know, this year our boundaries between work and home have been blurred like never before.
Yeah.
And you know, we don't have, yes, while there are benefits to working from home, you might see more of your kids or not have to worry about your commute or so on. The fact that those lines are blurred can make it very difficult to switch off. I mean, that must be something that you've been counselling alongside your journalism during the pandemic. You've been counselling in the NHS, so you've kind of been seeing it up close and personal as well, haven't you? That sort of blurring of boundaries. How can we navigate going forwards, since we're not through this yet? How can people navigate that sort of very strange situation for many of us, the first time we've had to work in this sort of environment?
I think it is about having some self-compassion, and I know that with a lot of journalists that will just make them go, you know, the whole word is too touchy-feely and I don't want to go anywhere near it and but there has to be some sort of, in order, one of the reasons we're in journalism is because we're probably quite empathic, so we're probably quite sensitive, because that's the way you pick up stuff, that's the way you pick up stories, that's the way you hear people effectively. But there is, you know, I think recognizing that sensitivity is really important, and giving yourself space between you and the story. So if there's a lot going on in your own life, and I was talking to part of my job when I was in the NHS, I was actually counselling acute cancer patients this year, but I was asked also to talk to some ICU nurses who are, you know, again, first responders. They're on and they're busy and they're doing their job and and then they're experiencing this thing which there's a phrase for it that's come up over the past couple of years called moral injury, which is, I don't seem to be doing my job as well as I'd like to, because I'm exhausted, because I'm also a carer, because I've got kids at home, because I'm worried about my mother, because, you know, all this other stuff that comes crashing in, which is the same for all of us who've been working through COVID. Yes, we've been doing the story and doing our job, but it comes with this, you know, with this mess of other stuff, this personal stuff. And I think it's about giving yourself some pause and some space to recognize that, noticing what's going on for you. So noticing, what are these thoughts? Have my behaviors changed? What am I feeling at the moment? Is this out of the ordinary? Am I behaving differently? And this is what we talk about when we're trying to understand whether somebody's experiencing sort of post-traumatic stress. Is it getting in the way of you living effectively? Is this stuff crowding in? Is this stuff feeling like it's too big to manage? And it's about the insight. You need to investigate that a little bit, I think. And if it is, think about how best you give yourself the pause and space to rebuild so that you can come back into it.
And it's very, I mean, it's very hard even the best of times, isn't it? I mean, we journalists are hyper vigilant in that we, even if we want a week off, we're scrolling through Twitter, or we're, you know, putting in calls, or kind of, I find it difficult not to listen to the news or read all the papers and just completely switch off. There's kind of like a hole there if I don't. And yet I know that that's unhealthy if I'm supposed to be on holiday or weekend or time with the kids.
So what do you do?
Well, the children are kind of like an enforced, I've got 3 kids, all of them are young. They're kind of an enforced gap from it all, because you just can't physically sit there and be involved in work, particularly when obviously I'm at home so much these days, when you've got a small person demanding a snack or wanting you to play with them or fighting their brother, or, you know, whatever it might be. But when they're not around, it's quite a self-discipline that I know I struggle with, and I'm sure lots of other journalists do. And if you're not in journalism, you can just switch off the TV and there's not a sort of a professional impact of that. You're not sort of out of the loop. But how, I mean, do we just need to be firmer with ourselves?
I think you need to create boundaries. And I think the good thing about being, you know, you're in a senior position, and I think, and those who are in a senior position, I think it's really good to say, these are my boundaries. So I won't be picking, it's half term. I won't be able to look at my phone on unless it's an emergency, unless something sort of really big happens. But it's about sort of that effective, I don't know, the effective delegation, I guess, if you can, to those who are working, and they will do the same to you, but saying these are my boundaries. So I don't, or try not to look at my phone after 7 o'clock at night. So I turn it off, I put it in a different room. You know, I physically have to get rid of it. Otherwise I would be sort of doom scrolling, and which is so tempting. And then you get lost in this vortex of social media. And by the time you pull yourself out and it's time for bed, your brain has been primed to stay awake because it's been looking at blue light for so long. But not only that, but yeah, you are in that hypervigilant state, which we're trained to do as journalists. Of course we are. We're trained to be vigilant. We're trained to be in that threat state, or and drive state. If you think of the brain as having 3 different systems: a threat system, which is like, right, where's the danger coming from? Where's the danger coming from? The drive, which is motivated by the threat, I've got to get onto it. And the soothe system, well, I would suggest that most journalists have a very strong threat and drive, which is on a lot, but their soothe system is perhaps a bit neglected. And the brain will not work effectively if those 3 are not in balance. And I'm not saying get rid of the threat and the drive, because they're there for a reason. You know, those sort of primitive, the way the brain works, got a bit in our brain called the amygdala, which is responsible for detecting threat and danger. It should be on. That's what sort of allows us to slam the brakes on when a child runs in front of the road and we're in the car. You know, we need the threat, we need the drive, but we also need the soothe. So what is it that is nourishing that you can do that allows you to step away from that hypervigilance, that turns the amygdala right down and gets another bit of our brain working, the prefrontal cortex, which just, you know, planning, rationalizing, just stepping away from.
Take dog for a walk, do some cooking, play with your kids, all those things.
Whatever it is, I think it's helpful to know what it is, though. You know, even if it's with some of my clients, it's just like, right, let's write them down. what depletes you and what nourishes you. And in those moments where you feel like you're on gotta do, you know, if you're highly anxious, and then you've got to know, right, that probably this might do me a bit of good if I step away from. Yeah.
So you've been working within the NHS for the last year, but you've also been in a newsroom, and onto the substance of covering coronavirus as a story. Lots of us, me included, kind of do it from a distance. You're, either in my case, Westminster or at home. You're talking to people on the phone a lot. Yes, you're writing about policy decisions and the impact on people's lives, but it's arm's length. We do have colleagues, often in broadcast, I think, and also news reporters that will have been in hospitals, in ICU wards, in care homes, actually, doing the face-to-face stuff, which is very difficult. And I mean, you must see differences between, I'm sure there are parallels, but there are also differences between a story like covering the Kashmir earthquake, where you were there for, I don't know, a couple of weeks maybe, and this story, which impacts so directly on all of our lives, because we all have loved ones that have been affected by it, also because we're working at home, but also professionally, it's not stopping. I mean, it's been however many months it's been now, 13, 14 months, more than that, 18 months. And the end isn't yet in sight. I mean, how can we psychologically equip ourselves for, it's the long haul, it's the duration, really, isn't it?
I think just the one step at a time. I think not by, I think we run the risk of catastrophizing if we try to jump too far ahead. And, what if June 21st isn't lifted? What if it's another 2 weeks? And if we're sort of unduly focused on the past as well, if we are stuck in a kind of ruminative, brooding or depressive what ifs that you can't find an answer to, then that's not productive. And we can only be where we are now, reacting to what is here now. And I can't say any more than that. And it's just, so be where you are, do the things that will benefit you in that moment. Try not to catastrophize. My son is a doctor, and when COVID first broke out, I was terrified for him. Because I thought, I kept phoning him up saying, "Do you have the PPE? Do you have enough PPE? Where are you working at the moment? What's going on for you?" Just that panic of we've all. I think a lot of us might be in that generation where we've got elderly parents. My mum is no longer with us. She would have been brilliant, actually, because she's an intensive care nurse, and she would have been brilliant at saying it's all right. But my dad's, in his 80s, so you worry about your dad. I'm worried about my son. I think I probably had COVID as well. I was in hospital recovering from an operation connected to the cancer last February. And my oxygen levels plummeted. I was on it was sort of what's going on. We don't know what's going on, etc., etc. So, and I think all of us probably have stories where, and I must say that I've been incredibly lucky. But all of us have stories where our personal and professional have kind of impacted on each other, and it's tough. And I think that's where you can only work with where you are now. You can't work with what might happen.
I want to interrupt for a minute just to flag people to the chat, because there's a couple of links to charities, both the Journalist Charity and Dart Centre Europe. There's links to both of those, and they can offer that. Obviously, will absolutely respect individuals' privacy and treat them confidentiality, and either they or partner organisations can offer specialist support. So please do, if you're watching, just have a little look in the chat, and look at those links, and obviously questions that you have for Sian we'll come to shortly. Sian, I've kind of been astonished that not only do we see you on our screens many days, you're also continuing your counselling work, and you're also an academic, you're doing a thesis. I mean, how on a practical level do you squeeze it all in? And have your employers, your journalistic employers, ITN, been understanding of that?
I think in answer to the second question, they've been very understanding of it, although slightly, I think at the beginning it was, why are you doing this? Why would you do this? You don't need to do this. Why are you doing this? But they have been very, very understanding. They were from the very beginning, actually, because when they offered me the job at the same time as I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I said to them, please offer this job to somebody else, because I don't know whether I'll come back from it. And they said, no, we'll hold it open. And I said, no, I don't want you to hold it open, because then there's a responsibility on me to get better, and I can't honestly tell you whether I will get better. I don't know where this is going to go. And then they said, okay, we won't hold the job open, but we're just not looking for anyone else for a while. And that was it gave me permission, I guess, to be ill without sounding too melodramatic about it. Yeah. It gave me permission not to have to rush back into work and to look after myself. And then, when I went back to them and said, yeah, I think I'll do it, but I'm not sure how it's going to be, they were like, yeah, that's fine. Take it at your own pace. And they've been brilliant all along, and very understanding of me doing this as well. And I can't remember what the first question was.
It's how you juggle it, really. I mean,
how I juggle it. Oh, yeah.
In your afternoons, doing something else in your evenings, pouring over your books. I mean, how does it work?
That's it. As you described my day. Most of the time ignoring my children. I forgot it was half term. It's like World Book Day and stuff like that. It comes around, you think, what? Nobody told me. And a half term just sort of becomes breaching into half term, and I think, but I'm working. What am I? So they're of the age. I've just sent them off with a tenner to buy sandwiches and crisps while I'm doing this. Terrible mother, really. They know to be quiet. So I do counselling here in this space, in this little triangle, this little rectangle, and then in the afternoon I have a back bedroom which I've got a camera in and some lights, and I do the news from the back bedroom. And yes, in the evenings and weekends I get up very early. I still get up at 5. I think that's the kind of remnant of BBC Breakfast days. I was on BBC Breakfast for 11 years, so I will still get up at silly in the morning, but it's actually quite nice because it's quiet. I've got nothing to do, as long as I can get through the kitchen without looking at the sink, or I'm thinking, why did everybody leave all the dishes out last night, or I've got to put another wash on, or so if I can get myself to my computer, then I can do a good couple of hours there. And then when I'm putting in something like an assignment, then it's just early hours of the morning, you're battering away at it, trying to get it done.
And you do sort of conferences and so on as well, as the sort of public-facing side of academia. How does it feel to have entered this entirely new world at this stage in your career?
I feel like an imposter. I've always felt like an imposter, though. I felt like an imposter I thought, how have you become a presenter? I never really felt, I don't know. I've always felt like that, always. So I even 35 years after being in journalism, I'm still sort of, how are you here? Especially from a presenting perspective, because, I wasn't the kind of ta-da kind of, I was told quite a lot to that we don't show off. And so I was very much stay in the background, and I love being a producer. I was a producer for many years, and I love being behind the scenes, and I made political programs, and I love the research as well. It's similar. I know it sounds bizarre, but I'm quite an introvert. So it's like having to gather up a lot of energy to do stuff that is out there, which sounds ludicrous really when I've been doing it for a long time. But yeah, I guess that's what I've been doing. So it's been quite boundaried. The stuff I've been doing here has been very private and personal and confidential, obviously. And the stuff I've been doing upstairs is the news reading. But coming into a new profession, I'm in awe of people who devote their lives to walking alongside people with mental health difficulties 5 days a week, 8 to 10 hours a day, because it is tough. It's so tough. And it's, the job I do as a journalist, because I've worked in daily news for so long, tomorrow's another day. You do your stuff, tomorrow's another day. When you're with someone, helping them through difficulties, you can be there for, you know, years. And there's no moment where they'll be, and I'm sorted, because we're not, you know, we're always trying to work this stuff out, and it goes on forever. So in that, it's not clearly delineated. And so I think in academia, it's the same thing as well. I published my first peer-reviewed paper a couple of months ago on journalism and trauma, and I wrote something and I thought, oh yeah, this is all right, there it is, and it's all my research, and it took me a very, very long time, and it was statistics based, and so I struggled with that, and I got it out, and I thought, so it'll be published. And then it came back to me with all these revisions, like, no, we don't like this for these reasons. And it went back and forth and back and forth, and so there's rigor, there's huge amounts of rigor, and I'm just learning that. So I feel like I'm on the baby slope. So even when I'm Dr. Sian Williams, which hopefully, you know, as long as I do this thesis okay, I will. I've got all my hours done. I've got all the other bits done, but so it's just the 45,000 words I need to write by the end of August. You know, if that goes in and it's okay, and I'm awarded a doctorate, even then I'll probably think, oh, but really.
How does that sort of degree of rigor and insight into your specialist subject affect your journalism? Is it a help?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. That's not to say that the others haven't been, by the way. So automatically thinking, what is the impact on Pippa if I say that? So I think the impact for me as a journalist is that I am much more aware of our responsibilities, I guess. The more I do and the more I learn about psychology and mental health, the more aware I am of our responsibilities of journalists, and the more I want to say, this is important. It's important to protect you, and it's important to protect them. You know, the story.
This is a key point, isn't it? Because we've talked quite a lot about the impact on us as journalists, but you know, daily journalists are involved with victims of trauma, survivors of trauma, whether it's reporting their stories or as witnesses. I mean, that you are much more qualified than all of us probably to be able to deal with that.
Well, there's a brilliant US journalist, he's dead now, but called Studs Terkel, who said, we mine for the precious metal of an individual, and before long, the sluice gates of pent up hurts and dreams are open. That sense of we keep going and we keep going until those gates are open and everything comes flooding out. And I was really reminded of that with the Naomi Osaka story this morning, who pulled out of the French Open, citing mental health issues, and you know, she had said that she didn't want to be interviewed, and I was aware of actually there was quite a lot of harsh things said about her before she quit, and I thought we do have responsibilities to, if somebody is telling us they need help, if somebody is telling us just leave me alone for a bit, can you? You know, I know that there's an expectation if you're in a particular position to talk, but I think if somebody is saying I'm struggling and I'm suffering, we need to hear that. We really do need to hear that. It's incredibly important we hear that. And I think sometimes, you know, when we're in the position of being with somebody who's very vulnerable, they really want us to help them tell their story. So I did an interview with a policeman called PC David Rathband, who was shot and wounded by a gunman called Raoul Moat years ago. And you'll remember this story, I'm sure, and a lot of people in this room will too. And he was running a marathon to raise money for the Blue Lamp Foundation, which is a charity he set up. And he wanted me to do an interview with him for Radio 4, which I did. And it was a really, really searingly honest and emotional interview where he was talking about Raoul Moat being on his shoulder when he ran. And I mean, it was And a year later, and the interview went out and he got lots of plaudits, and David was really happy, and we talked about it afterwards, and all the money that had been raised, and he was so chuffed to have done the marathon. And a year later he took his own life. And you can't help but think, what was our role collectively in the media? What was my role? What was in helping or hindering his mental health? And of course, none of us can, if somebody is going to take their own life, it's everybody around them always asks those questions afterwards. They just do. And I've talked to people, quite a lot of people who've lost people to suicide, and you can't help but ask those questions, and of course you'll never get the answer. But I think there is a tension, isn't there, when we're talking to people who are vulnerable, between helping them tell their story and leaving them alone when it's too much, recognizing when it's not good for them, it's not healthy.
And it's something that all of us as journalists need to be conscious of, and which is particularly hard in sort of fast pace of 24-hour news.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's some questions come in I'd like to ask you. So just going through the comments here. Somebody's asking, Yvonne is asking about your counselling work and what training did you get? When did you start it? And what do you get from that aspect of your work that you don't get from your journalism?
Thanks, Yvonne. I think so the counselling training that I did with the BBC was called Trauma Risk in Management. And it's not really counselling, it's more it's an assessment. So it's a very basic form of peer-to-peer support where you're sitting with somebody in a room and you're going through something that they found difficult, but you're doing it from a very practical level. So it's purposefully not emotive, because that's not your role. Your role is to see whether there are any red flags. What support are they getting? Are they drinking? Are they avoiding? Are they just, what's going on there? But not from a psychological perspective. That for me was good, but not enough to help me understand the brain. So that was when I started doing the sort of more formal psychological training. And then I decided to go the route of psychology rather than psychotherapy, because I like neuroscience. So I like to see the evidence and what works. And I like to know what's going on in the brain. So that was why. And then the doctorate in counselling psychology is quite a rigorous thing, whereby it's not a PhD. So it's research. There's a huge amount of research you have to do. And as I was saying, I've got to do this thesis. But there's also practical work. So for the past 3 years, I've been counselling individuals and families. And all that goes towards the doctorate, so that when you finish, you're kind of qualified as a doctor in counselling psychology. What do you get from that work that you didn't get from journalism? I think just that understanding of how best to manage a brain in crisis.
Jay Denham is asking about the extra credibility that having a specific qualification gives you as a journalist, because obviously it makes you an expert in that area. And they're saying that they'd like to write more about psychology and mental health. Do you feature something? They're unsure whether it would help to have that sort of extra insight.
I think it does, but I'm aware that there's a cost to it. There is. It's not cheap. And I know there are some universities that will offer bursaries, and I think it's worth it because, and I don't know whether it is a credibility thing. For me, it was just feeling more secure in being able to talk about it because I had a better understanding of it. But the more you know, the less you feel you know. So there'll never be I'll never stop learning. So it goes on and on and on and on, after the doctorate, what? But I do think it helps. Yeah, I do. If you're writing about mental health issues, to have some sort of understanding of the mind and the mind in different mental states. Yeah, I do think it helps.
There's a question about your breast cancer, Sian, and how you rediscovered your identity after that. It was obviously a very traumatic and difficult period.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. Thank you for asking it. It's something I'm looking at actually in the research I'm doing at the moment, which is with people with cancer, and they've got quite sort of high self-critical voices and quite low self-compassion. And they've done a mindfulness course. Has it made a difference? That's what I'm looking at. But I think what's interesting with both the counselling work I did with cancer patients and also the research-based work is how often the issue of identity comes up. Because if you think of yourself as quite a sort of healthy, resilient kind of person, then all of a sudden not being in control can feel terrifying, and it can be a real threat to your identity because you have become a patient. So you're no longer the complex individual that you are, that you think yourself to be. I think there is a reductiveness to being a breast cancer patient, any kind of patient, which can sometimes lead to a loss of self. And I think rediscovering that self can be quite a tortuous process. And what I'd say is rediscovering the identity is a bit by bit thing. And I was had a biopsy just last week actually, and I've got a breast cancer surgeon at UCH who is brilliant. Thankfully, it's clear, but you never. There's always this threat of recurrence that goes on. I think if you've got cancer. And while I was in there, I told her I was going off to read the news, and she said, "Oh, I remember." She said, "After you had just had your surgery, your first lot of surgery, she said you were wearing this lovely yellow dress." And I remembered the dress, and I said, and I remembered wearing the dress after I'd had surgery, and I thought you could see my wounds because I felt wounded. I thought you could see I was literally bandaged up, and I thought the audience can see it. They can see it's a tight dress. They'll be able to see every bit of vulnerability and fragility and wound that I have, and it felt like a big thing going out there, pouring myself into the one of these newsreader dresses, ridiculous that we all wear the same stuff really. We did at the time anyway. And being a kind of huzzah, here I am, confident presenter, when inside I was an absolute mess and felt very wounded and thought everybody could see it. And she'd sent me a message afterwards saying, "Oh, I love your yellow dress." And I said, "You could see I had these ports. You have ports after you've had a mastectomy. So they're like little buttons and they protrude. And that's what I thought you could see." And I said, "You could see my ports." And she said, "No, you couldn't." Anyway, she reminded me of this last week when I was in for the biopsy. And she said, "I remember that yellow dress." And I said, "I'm going to wear that for you tonight." So that night I dug out the yellow dress and I wore it on television. But it takes time. It takes time, And I was warned off writing a book by one, because they said, "You don't want to be defined by your cancer." And I thought, no, but actually that part of me is part of me. I can't not, just as, all that time I spent in the BBC or doing breakfast or, being a mum or a friend or whatever it is, all these are bits of us. And we need to hang on to all the bits of us. We need to appreciate all the bits of us and know that they're a bit messy and complicated and be okay with that.
I'm sure everyone agrees that we're very pleased that you got the all clear last week. So that's great news, and thank you for sharing that with us. There's a couple of questions about interviews and who's the most famous person you've interviewed to date? Who would you like to interview if you could interview anybody in the world?
The most famous. Yeah, the most famous. That's a really interesting question. I can tell you the nicest, most famous person. I'll tell you the nicest, most famous person, who was the actor Will Smith. There are probably other famous people who've escaped my memory at the moment, but I remember him because when he came in to do breakfast with me and Bill, he came in. Normally, stars, they sweep in, they've got an entourage, and they sit down, they talk about their whatever it is, their film or their what's it, and then they breeze off again, right? And he came in super early, like the same time we come in, like 4:30, and was going around television centre saying hello to people. And of course, all the people that work in the dead hours of the night are probably, not paid very much. There'll be cleaners, there'll be security guys, there'll be, and he was having his picture taken with them, and he was joking with them, and he was the nicest guy. And when he came out onto the sofa, I've always had a bit of a thing about Will Smith, and I thought, I'm going to get a bit silly. And he came in and he was just so delightful. And I couldn't stop myself looking at his ears. He's got these most amazing ears, and they look quite soft. So,
you didn't stroke them, did you?
And I stroked them. I mean, not without asking. And I don't even think I said, "Can I stroke your ears?" That would have been the weirdest question for a journalist to ask. And he didn't even talk about the film was rubbish. I can't remember what he appreciated. It was like, let's not talk about the film. Let's talk about other stuff. So we're talking about other stuff, and he was just a delight. Anyway, and I think Bill Turnbull, who I was presenting with, might have said, she's got a bit of a thing about you, and she really likes your ears. He used to do this a lot. He did this a lot. Oh, she really likes you because, and then you just like die inside. I absolutely died. He did the same with Rob Brydon. He did the same with Hanif Qureshi, the author. She's got a bit of a thing about you. He did it with the Stranglers, who I that was the first band I ever saw. Whenever they come, she loves me. Sounds like I love everyone. But anyway, but with him, and so he let me feel it, and they were soft. They were really soft. So him, I would say. And who would I most like to interview? Who would I most like to interview? I'd be quite keen to interview. I met the Duchess of Cambridge. They asked me to the Royal Foundation asked me to run the marathon for Heads Together when they first launched Heads Together, and so I met sort of William and Kate and Harry when they were doing that, and it always struck me that she was really, and this is before she was doing a lot of sort of more public stuff about children and mental health. She was really engaged and passionate about children's mental health. So we spent quite a long time just talking about children's mental health. And I think she's had quite sort of an interesting, she's done some work with the Anna Freud Centre, which is a really, really good, reputable place that works a lot with families. And I spent some time, I did a year working with families in complex trauma. So with kids who are in a really bad place. And I would like to interview her actually from both a journalist perspective and a mental health perspective.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I can see why. And we've got about 60 seconds left. So before I hand back to Hilly James, who's Women in Journalism's head of events, I just want to ask you one very quick last question, which is what next, Sian? I mean, you've got your incredibly established broadcaster and journalist. You've got your counselling career, and you obviously are doing your PhD thesis this summer. What next for you?
Oh, I don't know. I remember being asked by a fellow woman presenter, "What's your 5-year plan?" And I thought, I've never had a plan. I don't have a plan. I don't. Quick, Sian, get a plan. I've never had a plan. I just think I sort of stumble from one thing to another. And so the honest answer to that is I don't yet know. It really is a work in progress. I love broadcasting and I love psychology, and I would love to combine the two in some form or another. So it hasn't, there's no form to that or structure to that or 5-year plan to that, but I would love to combine the two in a way. Yeah. So if anyone's got any ideas of how I combine the two, then here I am.
Sian, thank you very much for talking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.